Welcome to the Best Living Show. I'm your host, Dr. Rachel Sweet. Breathe, eat, sleep, thrive in every aspect of your life. What does thriving actually mean? Thriving is not a word, it's an action, a way of living. And that's what the Best Living Show is all about. So get ready, step into a new narrative, and find a new way of being. There's a beautiful connection, a spark that flies at the intersection between the genetic code and your internal guidance system. We're going to throw away the culture that would tell us that thriving is something only for a few. Every one of us is unique. It's our time to discover why. The Best Living Show starts now. Hello, and welcome to the Best Living Show. I'm your host, Dr. Rachel Sweet, and I have an exciting episode tonight. We are joined by Dr. Melissa Petersen. I'm so happy to have her join us. She is a sought-after female visionary in the field of human potential and precision longevity. So her time is super valuable. So I'm honored that she's spending this time with us. Melissa is really looking at redefining the limits of what's possible for human flourishing. She is the founder of the Human Longevity Institute. She's a TEDx speaker, host of a human longevity podcast, author of a best-selling book, The Codes of Longevity. She also contributed a chapter to a book that I put together, which is Expressive Origins, all about the epigenetics of longevity. And, just so many things that she is a true agent of change in this field on a mission to help people thrive by design, which is, of course, what we're all about here at the Best Living Show, and unlock that potential within us to live the longest, healthiest, most fulfilling life that we can. And that definitely speaks my language. Welcome to the show, Dr. Melissa.
Oh, Rachel, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited for our conversation and time together.
Yeah. And actually, I'm just going to let listeners know that Dr. Melissa was a little bit of a mentor of mine. She actually certified me in epigenetic coaching. So I kind of got
we go
started
way
on
back
this journey together. Yeah, we go back. So it's kind of
I love
coming
it.
full circle here. So
Yes.
let's kind of start with how you became interested in this idea of longevity and human thriving.
Wow, that's a really interesting and probably a loaded question. You know, because there's a bit of it that feels like it was just my life path. And I will say this, that early on, so I kind of grew up in wellness. I started dancing when I was 2 years old. I was in fitness. I was in nutrition. I was already in kind of what we would consider the wellness industry. By my mid 20s, I went and I got my doctorate in chiropractic and then went on to get board certified in holistic health and natural medicine, and my wellness, my master's in human performance. And as I kept going and I started to practice and I was out in the field and I was working with patients, I started to quickly realize that what we were taught in our medical programs were not really how it was. And what I mean by that is you're told, like, hey, you just do the thing, whether it's a chiropractic adjustment. So it's a therapy, a modality, it's a pill. Here's the prescription. We are all taught our, tool of specialty to just,
Yeah.
if they come in with a problem, you do that thing. And I was like, but people keep coming back with the same problem. And if this is all that it was, then wouldn't this be already corrected? And of course, because I came from just a lifestyle background, I already knew the importance of how we move, how we think, how we breathe, what we eat. And that really is never looked at in any type of medical curriculum. And so thriving became really important to me early on because I was witnessing so many people just surviving. And I'm just like,
Right.
we're just somehow missing it. And so as I got more curious, I started to do my own deep dive. And of course, it was like what I saw again and again. I'm like, you can do the same thing at different times to the same person. One day it responds really well. One day it doesn't, the same thing to the same family. They're living in the, what is the difference? I'm like, oh, it's
Yeah.
the real estate between their ears. Okay. It's what we're thinking, what we're believing, how we are perceiving. And that led me into epigenetics. So way 20 years ago, I was an early adopter to Bruce Lipton, right? I was already doing functional medicine. I really dove into, and I was also deep dive studying with positive psychology, neuroscience, and just really over now it's been a more than 30-year clinical path of working with so many people and working with so many clinicians like yourself, of putting it together through both sides. And I just have always known, this is a long answer to your short question, but I just have innately known that we are not a piece or a part. So the way my brain works, I've always been able to see things in holism, and everything kind of approaches things in a very narrow silo. And I'm like, that's not how it actually works. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I believe it's always been in me. I think that I just had a perspective, and my environment and my upbringing really afforded me opportunities to know that there's so much more, and we're just not
Mm-hmm.
we're not talking about it, we're not looking at it, but what happens if we do and when we do? And so to me, thriving is, our return to wholeness. And it's
Right.
not just returning to it, but it's embodying it. And then it is the full expression of it. And when we do that, it is forever evolving because we're never just there. Each new expression is a next, and it is our each new ceiling is our new floor, right? And so it's this
Right.
continual
Yeah.
evolution. So
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Like we are more than just one thing. And so to think that we can go to one person to kind of who's been trained like in that one specific thing, like you said, like maybe chiropractic, I think that's going to solve everything. It certainly does. And we talk about all the different components of health, right? And how they all fit together. So I think that what you've summed up there, it really speaks to that and all the different components of health, but also mindset is a big part of it.
And
So,
it's interesting. And I just realized, Rachel, I apologize. I'm like, the big part of what kind of took me on the trajectory into longevity is when, I watched my mother at the young age of 54 transition out of her human form. And I grew up always saying, like, since I was a little kid, and I don't even know where I got the verbiage, I was just like, I've got great genes. I'm from an Italian family. I had lots of relatives living into their 80s to their 90s, up to 100. I'm like, I've got great genes. I'm going to live a long time. Life is good. And then my mother,
yeah,
who was not Italian, European, but still, regardless, to watch her, and all of a sudden,
yeah.
that perspective, that story I had was completely flipped upside down. And
Mm-hmm.
and there was that
Mm-hmm.
immediate kind of like, wait a minute, could her story become mine? And I'm like, well,
Right.
no, I'm not her. However,
Yeah.
it was immediately embedded in my unconscious. And so it was part of my own impetus, if you will, to really just unpack that and explore it and look at the possibilities. And I think for me, the biggest thing and what I love about longevity, I think it's a great model to teach how we can be more than we think we are. And the perfect example is aging as a construct. So we
Mm-hmm.
all, as a society, as a human race, depending on where we were born and our cultures we lived in, we were indoctrinated to what does that term mean?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk
Mm-hmm.
about this in the interview. There's some pretty fascinating statistics just on the meaning that we give to things and how they're actually informing and influencing not only our DNA, right, but how our
Mm-hmm.
physiology works overall. And is that speeding up the rate and pace of aging, or is it
Mm-hmm.
slowing down and actually allowing us to live longer, healthier, better? So for me, when I know, like, oh, it's not just like think happy thoughts. It's like, no, this is literally remodeling our DNA. And
Yes.
man, there's so much here. There's so much here. And for me, it's kind of like, how can we create a multi-generational effect? And it
Mm-hmm.
is the story of longevity. What we do today
Right.
can and does affect generations to come. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
exciting.
absolutely. Absolutely. You talk in the opening kind of paragraph of the book, the chapter that you did for the book, you said, the person who's going to live to 150 at this moment is on the planet been born. And then you go on to talk about all of the technologies and how this advanced. And even since we wrote this chapter almost a year ago, right?
Yeah.
um, the advance in what's happening and how fast it is happening is incredible.
Mhm.
And so this idea of aging and you spoke a little bit there of kind of the mindset of it, right? So some people talk about, oh, I'm getting old, or just can't do that anymore. You can start to hear that mentality. Then there's the other side of things where people are like, oh, well, 50 is the new 40. And we're like, looking back and saying like, hey, I'm younger than what my chronological age is. And then, you also talked about our DNA, which, as we know, we talked about this on the show. There is the time that we pass around the sun, but there is also our biological aging, and that can look so different from one person to another. And as you said, your genetics do get passed down, but it doesn't mean that your parents' fate is yours. You have
Correct.
absolutely a choice because of epigenetics to
Yeah.
work on that and change that.
Yeah. 100%. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, yeah, I'll let you ask me the question because there's so many fun things in there that we can kind of unpack. And I think what I want to let everybody know is that, yes, there's, you know, just even in the last year with the explosion of AI, I mean,
Yeah.
we are going to see such a rapid advancement of what's coming to market because so much can be computated now, right? Even on
Yeah.
quantum computers. So we have now the best minds in the world, literally like it's all being fed into these AI systems, right? And so
Yeah.
the amount of data that these systems are getting and what they're able to sift through and sort through and start to make new and it's only as good as what we put into it. Let's be really clear. AI,
Yeah.
there's been AI for a long time, but a lot of them got shut down because quality in, just like epigenetics, what's the input? What's the signal? What's the
Mm-hmm.
quality of the
Mm-hmm.
information coming in? AI is exactly the same. It is still a
Yeah.
program, just like our
Yeah.
DNA is. It's code, right? But what are we
Yes,
feeding it?
absolutely.
What are we feeding it? So depending on what we feed it, depends on really what we're going to get out of it. And so it is hard to even imagine how quickly we're going to have some pretty profound medical breakthroughs. Yet I'm going to tell you fundamentally, I mean, I speak on these panels, I sit in on, I'm always looking at what's coming out, listening to everything, watching it, and hands down, what continues to be missed because there's not a lot of money in it is our mindscape. Like it's
Right.
fundamental in the process. And you just said something really interesting, how we can hear ourselves say, oh, I'm just getting older. And I would say
Mm-hmm.
to a person, well, what does that mean for you? Right?
Right.
We can assume we think we know what that means, but what does that mean for you specifically? And I would ask your listeners right now to consider, what does getting older mean to you? Is it a good thing, a bad thing, a neutral thing? Does it mean like, oh, I just can't do stuff anymore? Well,
Mhm.
who says? Why not? Right?
Right.
Is that what you want it to mean? It's okay if you do. There's no judgment on it. But I often say we can never do better if we don't know better. So it's the moment that the unknown in the unconscious, that back level, just kind of scripts and programmings that are running on autopilot, when they become conscious, we can at least have some be at choice. Like, oh, what does it mean to be old? What does it mean? Like, I just can't do that. Can I really do that or can I not? So
Mhm.
we have to be willing to at least reconsider our own words that we're saying, beliefs that we're holding before we'll ever be able to actually do better. And those that are out there saying, hey, 60 is the new 40, they can say it, but do they actually believe it? Because
Mm.
there's phenomenal research that we can say affirmations all day and we can say positive things and we can hype ourselves up, but if we don't actually believe it,
Right.
then we actually have more of a negative effect. There's kind of this boomerang, backlash because it's creating such a what I want to say, such an opposing force within our
Mhm.
conscious and unconscious mind. So I think the biggest first point to explore is inviting the audience to just get curious without judgment. What does aging mean to you? What does getting older mean to you? And if you like what it means, fantastic. If you don't really like what it means, then you can upgrade that definition. You can start to play with it. You can ask different questions and kind of poke at it from different angles and let it become a little bit more malleable. And the best way to do that is with the question, well, what if? Okay, well, what if getting older actually meant an amazing life? Like it meant more. It meant more friends, more knowledge, more wisdom, more opportunity, more freedom, more flexibility? What if it means more instead of less, right? So the what if question is a fun way to kind of pop that open.
Yeah, I totally agree because it is really your own definition of that and what that looks like. And I know I'm always saying like, I go to the gym for my 80-year-old self and not so much for who I am now, but for my 80-year-old self, because I want my 80-year-old self to have flexibility and mobility. And so that's kind of the choice that I'm making right now. And I believe what I'm doing now at the gym will impact my future self down the road. So I think that's kind of what you're saying. I'm saying like, well, you know, if I look at my grandparents, they, as they got into their 80s and mid 80s, they started to lose some of that flexibility and ability to do things. And so how do I now affect that change in my own life? And it's what I do right this minute. But I
Right.
also do think there's that mental process too that, as you said, well, what does, it's not just the physicality and the movement. What is my life going to also look like, right? What am I going to be
Right.
doing? What social connections will I have? What does all that mean to me? It's a little bit of a bigger picture, right?
Yeah, and I cannot take credit for this, but Peter Attia calls it back casting, and I actually really love it. So the idea is, go out to the point of if you and I do a lot of these different processes, and we actually do this in our free 4-part reverse course. I kind of take people through this, but we have a way that we teach you how to calculate your longevity potential. But just for ease right now, how long, if you could live as long as you want to, right? Like, how long do you think you'd want to live? Kind of get a number. And then what is it that you want to be doing at that age? So even let's just pretend everybody's like, I'm going to live to 100. Great. Let's think about the 100-year-old you. How do you want to be? And that's kind of what you're doing right now, the 80-year-old you at the
Mm-hmm.
gym. So how do you want to be at 80? Well, all of a sudden when we start thinking about the 80-year-old self, the 100-year-old self, the one that wants to travel, that wants to move, that wants to pick up the not just the grandkids, but the great grandkids, right? That wants to still be learning and growing and not just kind of tucked away in a wheelchair in a back corner, but
Right,
wants to be participating in life, then that means some basic things. We need to
right.
grip. We need to be able to stand up, sit down, bend, twist, right? So movement
Mm-hmm.
is essential. The ability to not just move, but to actually have the capacity to the muscle on the body, right?
Right.
That lets those bones move. That's what contracts to move the levers so we can
Yeah.
do all the things. So sorry, that's my dog. I hope you guys aren't hearing that in the background. Office dog is done for duty now, everybody. She's like, I'm done. I want to go have dinner. So it is a really beautiful process to kind of say, well, what if, how do I
Right.
want to be at that age? How do I want to be looking, feeling, being? And then you go, so then what would I need to start doing more of and or less of now
Mm,
that can really support that type of intentional life I want to be creating for myself?
right. Right. And now we talked a little bit about how genetics plays a role in this, and then the epigenetics. And, obviously you just said what we do and what we don't do. That's part of our lifestyle. I mean, how much is that impacting us as well when we think about backcasting and, if we're wanting to live
Sure.
to 100?
Yeah, that's a great question. So kind of depending on which research study you look at,
Mm,
the numbers get a little skewed, but here's what we know. Pretty from a pretty solid standpoint. We can go with the percentages of 20% of our destiny, so to speak, is kind of hard written in our code and about 80% is lifestyle driven. Now let's just really and I'm going to explain lifestyle in a moment because it's not just the food you're eating and
right.
the exercise that you're doing. There's I want to get more specific on that. So but let's just pause on this because what's so fascinating to me is that people take for granted their own power when we give away our power every single day,
Mm,
thinking that what we need exists outside of us in a lotion, potion, pill, therapy, or treatment.
yeah.
And there is no lotion, potion, pill, therapy, or treatment that is going to give you an 80% or greater result
Mm,
outcome. There is not. So if I could tell you today, hey, do this one thing and it's going to increase your
Mhm.
odds by 80% and reduce your rate and risk of chronic disease, early death, and dying, would you do it? And if you thought it was a pill I was going to give you, you'd be like, yes, I win.
Sure.
But
Sign me up.
when I say get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a
Mhm.
night, when I say, move 7,500 steps a day, like, will you
Mhm.
do it? Somehow all of a sudden people think, oh, it's like what we
Mm.
dismiss. We almost think it's just hype. It's just some
Mm.
boring advice out there. But there's deep science of why this all works. So, what if you'd like me to, Dr. Rachel, I'm super happy to take a moment. And I know this is what you do. I know this is your show. So I don't, I know your guests are well educated on this. But if you want, I'm happy to take a moment just to connect some dots around, again, that 20% versus 80%, the
Mhm.
genotype, the genome versus the phenotype. So kind of the code versus the expression of the code.
Sure.
And, and okay.
It
So,
never hurts to have a refresher.
okay. Okay. Yay. We love refreshers. So I like to try to keep this simple, gang. Again, if you are, I'm sure you're brilliant. And so I mean, no disrespect to anybody. I just like to make things common sense. Like it just has to work for me. That's just the way my brain is. So your code, our genetic code, right? It's your instruction manual. It's everything you've ever needed from every bit of lineage of who you've ever been, who you ever will be. It's all in there. There's your code. It's like, here's the blueprint for you. Terrific. But a blueprint, just like a house blueprint, doesn't build itself. So the potential is all there. The instruction manual is all there. But what are we going to do with it? So now that's what's called your genotype. It's your DNA. There it is. Okay, this DNA, it literally, it's got to be accessed. So every moment of every day, we've got to call on that instruction manual. Oh, I've got to make more. I've got to repair. I've got to build. I've got to digest. I've got to, I've got to replicate. Like every moment of every day, we're accessing our genetic code, our instruction manual of life. And this is this phenomena of epigenetics. It isn't the code that does the work. The code are the
Right.
instructions. It's the epi above this code, genome. So epigenetics is above the genome. It is a signal that says, hey, knock, knock, open up. I need to read you. Okay. So the epigenetic signal is literally going, I need to read it. And then when it reads it, it's going to replicate and do what it needs to do. Then when it's done, it should ideally close back down to keep that bit of the code safe, protected, so there's no scratches along the way. So think of your DNA almost like a pristine record, or I'm dating myself, right? Or how about a CD? So it's just nice and shiny. And as we chronologically age, and the more that we go to open up that code, sometimes the door doesn't get closed. The more stressors, physical, mental, emotional, chemical, environmental, the more demands, the more inputs, the more overload to this system that's constantly asking that code to open up to access the instructions. It's just creating more wear and tear. An easy way to think about it. And that wear and tear starts to leave some scratches, some bumps and bruises, so to speak, on that shiny CD. Well, your code is always there, but the more scratches that come along impede the ability to access the information. So if you were to play it, it's going to skip, right? So it's the
Yep.
same thing happens inside of us. And this is what accelerates the rate and pace of biological aging. And this really matters, gang, because biological aging, the rate and pace of it, means how fast or slow we are breaking down, wearing out on the fast track to dysfunction, disruption, and disease. So if we can't read that code, we can't replicate, we can't repair, we can't do the things we're naturally supposed to do. And then all of a sudden, everything starts to break down. And yes, we do all of a sudden find ourselves with more and more and more diseases. Medicines don't correct the disease. They're not repairing the DNA. They're just treating a symptom so you can be a little more comfortable on your path to your transition out of this physical body. And it's not a
Right.
super fun life. Okay. So the field of longevity is saying, how do we get back to that pure code before it was all scratched? Well, gang,
Mhm.
this process of the scratching, that is something that's referred to as DNA methylation. So really where we're at now with the science, and which has even gotten so much more exciting even in the past year, as you mentioned, Dr. Rachel, is really understanding this phenomena of what is truly moving the needle at the DNA level, what is allowing us to remodel the DNA, what's allowing us to kind of clean away or erase away, if you will, some of those scratches so we can get back to that pure code. Because when we can read it, we can repair, we can replicate, we can
Yep.
do what we're supposed to do, but also when we can get back, we can literally youth and we can become younger looking, feeling, acting, being,
Mhm.
because it's as
Mhm.
if we're accessing parts of the code that were our 30-year-old
Right.
self versus our 50-year-old self, so to
Yeah.
speak. And
Yeah.
so we now understand, we're understanding more and more day by day about what these needle movers are. And so when I say that 80%,
Hmm.
80% of what's available to us remodels the DNA, like literally enables us to get back to that code so that aging can be optional, disease can be optional. It's not just you got it, you got it. The code are the instructions. What you do with it is how it expresses.
Right. It's funny if you got does she have it or is it Maybelline? I remember that old commercial.
It's Bailey.
And that's really it. It's true. What we have, as you said, is that blueprint, and we can affect it. And so, I mean, as you said, 80% of it is we can do lifestyle, right? Sleeping, nutrition, movement, all those things. How much is technology going to play into all of that as we go
Okay,
into the
well,
future?
I want to take a moment. I don't want to just dismiss this. Now, technology lets us hack it. So I'm big into longevity hacking, and I'll tell you about my favorite types of technology that mimic the body's natural responses. Okay, so let's just take a moment and understand the things that first add to all those scratches, accelerate
Okay.
this process, and put us in a place where we are not expressing our greatness, where we are aging quicker, where we are increasing our rate and risk of all cause mortality and chronic disease. So that's again, if I just come back to, I know the word seems very overused and there's kind of multiple ways to understand it, but let's just for common language, stress to define. Stress is neither bad nor good. Stress is
Right.
neutral. Stress
Right.
is a demand on the system, and we need demands so that we can actually grow and thrive forward. However, when we don't have enough resources to keep up with the demands, or we don't have the proper time to rest and recover from the
Mm-hmm.
demands, then we start to break down. Okay, so again, keeping it really simple, too much physical, mental, emotional, chemical, environmental stressors. And gang, this is everything from too many inputs on your cell phone, you're scrolling on social, you're living in a city and you've got too much air pollution coming in, you're in a high EMF area, you are a chronic exerciser and you are always at the gym and you are always working out. You are you're an OMAD faster and you're only eating once a day. Like we do so many extremes
Mm,
now. And we
right.
think that these things are good, but even good can become bad in an
Mm-hmm.
overloaded system. So we've
Right.
kind of lost our barometer, so to speak, of how to attune in and really appreciate like, wait, what's too much? What isn't enough?
Right.
And how do I actually start to help to pump the brakes on this overload to my system so I
Mm-hmm.
can have, I call them micro moments of getting at least into parasympathetic rest, heal,
Mm-hmm.
digest,
Mm-hmm.
connect. That's where we cannot heal and we will never slow down aging if we're always in sympathetic overdrive, if we're always in stress demands and too much, too much, too much, and not enough, not enough, not enough. And so, from this standpoint, this is why that general, oh, lifestyle, what we eat and how it, this is everything, you guys. First and foremost, your thoughts become things. Okay. So, what are you thinking? What do you believe? Because your perception drives your reality and it also drives your chemistry in your body. Now, what we know from some pretty exciting research out there. It was over a 20-year research study by Dr. Becca Levy out of Stanford, is that just your perception of aging will determine how fast or slow you age and can either add or take away more than 7 years to your lifespan just by thought alone. Do you think
Wow.
aging is good or bad? That's going to already set you up for either 7 more good years or 7 fewer. That's step one.
Mhm.
That's pretty powerful. Now,
Yeah.
there's a lot more that goes to that on what's actually happening at our DNA level. But our thoughts, our psychology influences our physiology because it's literally signaling our neurotransmitters, which are our brain
Mhm.
hormones, and our hormones in our body. And these hormones are chemical messengers. And so when we have too much distress, too much of that sympathetic overdrive, foot on the gas for too long, we make way too much cortisol. We have way too many inflammatory hormones active. We accelerate aging, we accelerate breakdown. Okay. And so, and then that's what's tied to all these metabolic diseases and all the things. Everybody's, oh, I'm taking this medication. Oh, I got diabetes. Oh, I got heart disease. Yeah, you do because we're super distressed by what we're
Right.
thinking, what we're eating, how we're moving or not moving, the people, environments we're in, right? Like it's all of the
Right.
outer world. Remember, I said it earlier, gang, quality in, quality out, garbage in, garbage out. What's the quality of the signals that are informing our inner physiology right down to our DNA? So simply by starting to pump the brakes, do a little vagal toning, that can be as easy as just breathing slower. Doesn't even have to be tricky breath work. Just slowing down our rate and pace of respiration can already get us out of that busy into a more parasympathetic state. Okay, that's just one simple little thing because everybody's overloaded. It's how am I thinking and feeling? Does it feel good? Does it not feel good? Well, the things
Mm.
that feel good, do more of. The things that don't feel good, can you do a little less of? Maybe, maybe not until we can become conscious because you're keeping your chemistry in a pro inflammatory state and you're
Right.
always going to be accelerating aging, even if, and here's the role of technology. Okay, I'm getting to that. Like, I just want everybody to have a foundation. The reason so many people are going gaga for technology is because we have forgotten how to modulate our own system.
Mm.
Now, I can
Mm.
give you things, you can give me thousands of dollars. I will happily take your money if that is what you want. But right now, I'm going to tell you exactly what you can do for free. You don't have to spend all of it. But if you feel better spending money, then that's great. Like I'll help you be efficient. Okay. So because we've lost such connection, one of the first places technology is actually building a bridge, which I'm a big proponent of in cycles, is wearable
Mhm.
technology.
Mm.
Okay, so wearable
Mm.
technology gives us a way. There you go. You got your Garmin on. Gives us a way to start tracking our own system and
Mhm.
to get back in touch with, well, I might think something's good, but my body might be telling me something different. So it's step one is just creating a greater state of awareness. Where are you really at? What is really supporting you and what is really continuing to stress your system out, even if you don't think it's stressful? Okay. And then again, awareness lets us move to choice. Oh, well, I see if I have one glass of wine, I sleep really well. But if I have two
Mm.
glasses of wine, I am not even getting an hour and a half of deep in REM. And I know if
Mhm.
I don't get deep in REM, I'm not going
Mhm.
into that restorative sleep where my DNA is repaired. Ooh, maybe I better stick to one glass instead of two. Okay. It now becomes a choice point. So there's awareness that the technology gives us an insight. Two is now I'm at choice. Do I want to or not? That's up to you, right? Depends on how do you want to be at 100? Do you want to be here at 100? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. No judgment, right? So that's the first place that technology comes in. The second place that technology comes in is really kind of overriding our messiness. And what I mean is
Mhm.
our unwillingness to just take a knee, take a minute to help our systems re regulate, to rewire our neurology, our physiology, to really remodel our DNA. So, one of my favorite pieces of technology is it's a brain hacking device and it's literally working with re-regulating brain waves and neurotransmitters and the autonomic nervous system so that we can pump the brakes. So what might take hours or weeks from it's like, oh, I gotta learn how to meditate, oh, I gotta do all this deep breathing, oh my god, put the darn headset on and in 20 minutes, I have research that I know I can improve the modulation of your autonomic nervous system by close to 40% in 20 minutes. It's equivalent to 6 hours of recovery in one
Mm.
20-minute session.
Mm.
Most
Mm.
people aren't even getting a full 6 hours of sleep at night, let alone
Right.
have the time they need to recover. Okay, so technology is going to help us help ourselves. is that answer. And there's more to it. We can talk molecules, we can talk some other things that are coming, but
Yes.
I'll come up for air because I know I've been going for a lot.
Yes. That's well, actually, what we're going to do now is take a break. Everybody can take a deep breath and get some relaxation, and we'll be
Slow it
back in a
down.
few minutes because we're going to talk about your age reversal class. We'll talk about more lifestyle factors and all the things that go along with that and technology. I think you brought up some great points about wearables and doing brain training. So we'll be right back. Stay tuned in because you'll want to hear about the free age reversal class that we're going to be talking about in the next segment. Hello, and welcome back to the Best Living Show. I'm your host, Dr. Rachelle Sweet, and we are joined tonight by Dr. Melissa Petersen. We've been talking all about longevity and thriving and what it's like to change maybe your mindset on how we age and how we think about that, right? And how that affects us biologically. So before the break, we were talking a little bit about some of the things that you really have to kind of, as you the basics for how we can think about aging and our longevity and what gets us there. And we talked a little bit about sleep, the stress that we put on ourselves, and really that idea of slowing down. And so I think that really goes into the thriving. Kind of what is what we're living right now and what does thriving look like? Because you said we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves. Maybe we're very busy, stressful jobs, the kids, the house, all of these things. We run from one place to another. As you said, we might live in a place where the environment is not as conducive to our health as it could be. And then there's the idea of thriving. So kind of what are we looking at here as far as like taking that time to slow down? I mean, there's so many things that can be at, and you talked about the technology and how that can help us, right? I look at my Garmin, I look, am I stressed? Am I sleeping? And then I can adjust accordingly. But how do we think about getting that our sympathetic system back online, working for us so that we can start to be thriving and
let me answer this first by asking you a question, Dr. Rachelle.
Yeah.
So part of this show is really about thriving, right?
Yes, absolutely.
From your research, from your work, from your conversations. And I'm not meaning just with your guests, because those are, I think, cherry picked, right? What percentage, in all honesty, and I want to ask the listeners to, like, this isn't a judgment, but how many of us are truly, genuinely would describe ourselves as thriving?
That is true. Yeah, I think, we put a lot of demands on ourselves. So that's a good question. How much of us are? And I would say in the demands of today's world, it would be, a smaller percentage than we'd like. Right. I don't know what that number would be, but it's definitely.
And so when the numbers show that at least 83% of the population say that they are stressed out, 83%, maybe 17%, if we're really lucky, would identify as really being thriving. I'm just going to use those numbers. Okay. And so I bring this up to say, I love the idea of, like, well, yes, okay, great. Like, if I could, maybe what I want to, there's some cool things. I can remodel my DNA. I can use technology. And look, gang, I can tell you something before we're even done that can reverse age you by 8 years and 8 months. So it's not that we can't do this stuff to our bodies. Okay. So let's just take a moment and appreciate there are tools, there are modalities, there are things. Fundamentally, I would ascertain, I would postulate, theorize, whatever the word is I'm looking for, that we have forgotten how to live. We haven't even taken the time individually, let alone collectively, to really deeply, fully, A, consider, and then B, begin to cultivate, craft, curate, and design the life that we want to live. We're all just kind of getting up, going through our days. Most of us are on autopilot. We have
Right.
about 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. 90% of those are
Are
literally the
negative.
same thought as the day before and the day before and the day before and the day before. And that simply means we keep getting more of what we've already gotten. We are living our past every day. Our past is our present. And how can we ever design a new future if we don't just take a moment and say, well, what kind of future do I want?
Mm.
So I would really ask people, I would invite them in. And this isn't just a one off. Like I find, and look, I do it myself. Like I'm right now doing a 30-day process for myself to just like, I've got to work the muscle of up leveling my own life. I would say I'm thriving in many ways. I love my life.
Right.
There's so much greatness and abundance and health and vitality, so much. That doesn't mean this is where I stop. This is
Right.
great. And I know more is possible, yet more will never become possible if I do not continue to be the master of my destiny, the
Mm.
creator of my reality. And that means I must show up with intentionality day over day over day over day, not just
Right.
autopilot living. So, can we live longer, live better? Can we thrive by design? Yes, we can. But how do we know what that even is? So, step one, everybody, what does thriving mean to you? And if you really could let yourself go as big, as bold, as beautiful as possible, there were no obstacles, no limitations, what would that look like? Now,
Mm.
often, Rachel, I don't know what it's like in the clients that you work with, but after 30 years of this, whenever I ask people about kind of their vision, the first thing they tell me is what they don't want. And this is very natural.
Yeah.
This is not a judgment. It's not a
Mhm.
judgment. I'm just letting, I want everybody to know it's okay if this happens. If you find
Right.
yourself having a hard time envisioning thriving, because if you haven't been thriving, you don't really know what that even
Right.
means per se. And so it's easier to go, well, I know what I don't want. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
haven't experienced yet, how can you articulate it? So give yourself some grace. Say, okay, well, here's everything I don't want. Perfect. Get it
Right.
out. Just get it out of
Yeah.
your head, get it on paper. And even give yourself permission to verbalize it so you can own it. You can see it because then you know this. There's a part of your brain. Now, the don't, it's still going to show us what there's a little rub to this. But the reticular activating system, what we start
Mm-hmm.
to speak over ourselves, unto ourselves, is what our brain is always going to find and
They
notice.
look
So whether
for
we
it.
tell ourselves what we don't want or do we do want, we're right. And we're always going to have that reality. That's confirmation bias. So write out what you don't want. Then right next to it or on another sheet of paper, go, okay, if this is everything that I don't want, then what do I want?
Mm-hmm.
So let's pretend it's like, well, I don't want to be tired all the time. Okay, then you say, if I don't want to be tired all the time, then what do I want to be? I want to be energized.
Right.
Great. So you're going to, I want to be energized. Perfect. So what don't you want? What do you want? But here's the next part. Why? I don't want to be tired all the time. What do you want? I want to be energized. Why? Because I want to enjoy my life. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's real basic, right? Like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Great. You're going to go through that and you're going to start to just sift and sort through like, okay, first of all, what actually really matters? Because when you say what you don't want, you say what you do want, and then you really say why you want it, you're going to realize that some of the things that you think you don't want, they're really not that important to you to change. Like when you really
Mm-hmm.
get to the why behind it. So, what that
Mm-hmm.
means is if it isn't important enough, it's not going to change. And that's not a judgment. That's just a way to go, oh, let me be kind to myself. Let me give
Right.
myself a pass. Not everything has to happen at once. Not everything has to be 100%. Let me focus on the needle movers, the
Right.
small hinges that swing the really big doors in your life. So we'll never have something more and we'll never even know how to start to modulate our system and that we even deserve to go buy some tech and to take some cool molecules and to have new relationships and to craft new experiences if we don't first start with asking ourselves what type of life do we want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Very, very true. And I think perhaps people haven't stopped to think about that either because we're just bombarded all the time. So maybe this also kind of goes back to how we started the show, that sometimes it's easier to look at that technology and look for that other um, thing, whatever that might
Sure.
be, that can help us. And really, it's not going to, because it's all external thing, and we really have to start within ourselves. And I think you bring up a good point. A lot of people do start with, well, I just know I don't want to feel this way anymore. But I think that we have to kind of acknowledge that and take that on and say, okay, this is how we're living. Then
Yeah.
how can we change that? And there's been a lot of research on blue zones. Obviously, like the people there live. There's a lot of centenarians, right? And they when they look at these blue zones, a lot of it is uh, how they think, how they relate to others, and there is a lot more slowing down, as you said. So if only 17% of us are thriving, how are we going to move that needle then to get more people to slow down and even start to think and put themselves in a place where they can even take advantage of what's coming down in
Yeah.
the
I mean,
technological
it's the answer isn't that everybody has to thrive. The answer is to remember that we all get to have our own unique, sovereign human experience. And what I want is going to be different than what you want versus the next person and the next and the next. And that's really okay. I think sometimes the challenge or almost the misnomer is that we think everybody has to want the same thing or it all has to look a similar way or we all have to move to the positive rainbow unicorn outcome and we don't. It's
Mm-hmm.
more about really saying, wait, what's real and honest for me? Because that's
Right.
the only thing that's driving your experience. So to move out of being stressed and overwhelmed and overloaded,
Mm-hmm.
first starts with a desire because a lot of us are addicted to the chemicals of being stressed
Mm-hmm.
and overwhelmed and overloaded.
Dopamine.
And there's it's not it's not even just the dopamine because dopamine is actually a really good important
Oh yeah,
neurotransmitter.
they're all
That's the
important, right?
neurotransmitter of motivation
Yeah,
and
of course.
taking
Yeah.
action. It's the reward chemical.
Yeah.
However, we're being triggered in
Mm,
non-rewarding ways, right?
right.
So we need more and more and more. We are having
Mm,
this empty hit, especially on social media, because it fires it
mm,
off, but we didn't wire anything meaningful in. So it starts to feel more
mm,
empty and empty and empty. And so we feel more and more and more depressed and withdrawn and isolated and
mm,
disconnected. But yet we
mm.
think we're connecting because we're seeing everybody's life on the screen in front of us, but it's not real connection.
But it's not a real
So I would
connection.
Yes. And so connection first begins within, right?
Mm,
Connection to self, connection to personal wants, desires, dreams, hopes, emotions, feelings. So connection to self. And as we
mhm,
begin to connect within and get a sense of what is true, then there's a little bit of meaning. Meaning is one of my key pillars of how we slow down and reverse biological aging. Again, what's the meaning we're giving things? Because when the meaning that we give life, so one of the things you mentioned, the blue zone with centenarians, the meaning they give
mm,
life is so rich. It's a life of purpose. Like they feel connection.
mm,
And
mhm,
one of the things that they all seemingly do really well is they expand time. So they look forward. So we in the modern world live in a
mhm.
compression of time. There's
Right.
never
Yeah.
enough, never
Never
enough, and
enough. Yeah.
too much, too busy, too. And our
Mhm.
bodies literally do this and we
Right.
compress. And that increases all of those inflammatory markers and hormones. And that's what accelerates the aging. So they view the world differently. And it's not
Mm,
just because of the inputs. Yes, the environment supports that, but they already perceive life as something they want to live forward into.
mm, right.
So we need to
And
connect.
yeah, then as you said, there's that purpose. I know in Japan, it's the ikigai, right?
Mhm.
That's that kind of purpose that they have of how they interact with their community and what they have a value and a meaning to that community and how they interact with it. And it comes from within, basically.
They do. And here's something though that's also so important, gang, is that especially in the westernized world, we're like, oh, but what the meaning, the purpose that they give is actually the purpose of life.
Mm,
It's not about like, oh, I have to go be the medicine person for the tribe. No, that's not what purpose is.
right, right,
Purpose is life. And they get that.
right,
Oh, the purpose is I get to get up. Get to get up. I get
right.
to go see my people. I get to connect. I get to
Mm-hmm,
plant seeds. I get to wait to watch them sprout in
right,
another 3 months. They're always looking
right.
forward.
So they
Life
take
is
wonder in the world too, right? That's kind of what you're saying is
wonder and awe.
an awe,
Yes.
yeah,
So if we had to put it in a word, we can say it's optimism, right? They're optimistic, they're curious, they're open, they're really kind of in that forward direction, if you will. And
right.
so it can any moment of any day, we can start to shift our physiology, we can start to shift our DNA, we can start to shift if we're aging faster or slower just by getting curious of how
Mm,
we are thinking and feeling. And what I mean by that is how we're kind of viewing or taking in the experience. And sometimes we can realize
right.
like, oh, I'm thinking a lot, or I'm really overloaded. But a lot
Mhm.
of times it's our feelings that kind of cue us in. Oh, I'm feeling tense. I'm feeling really
Mhm.
happy. Like that interaction was awesome. I felt excited leaving that, charged up. That one drained me. Oh my gosh, right? So we do know if we're just simply willing to go, oh, wait a minute. My feelings are actually an energy barometer. They're letting me
Mm,
know about my hormones and my neurotransmitters and how my brain and body are firing and wiring together.
mm,
And this is either an environment that is sending in positive inputs and signals that my DNA is really loving, or it's sending in a lot of signals that my DNA is not loving. It's going to close it down. It's going to scratch it up. And I'm going to become less and less and less the
mm.
more and more and more I keep myself compromised in those types of environments and interchanges.
Yeah.
So,
So I think what we've come down to then, and the whole of our discussion is we really have to look within. We have to know what it is we want for our lives, but we also have to have that curiosity, that wonder to know what it is that we want. Well, as we journey on, right? As we move through this life, what is it that we want out of it, and how are we going to face it in a positive manner or in the way that we're going on right now? If we're under pressure, how can we change that? Right? So I think that's what we're boiling it down to is where are you now and where are you going to? And
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 just take it one moment at a
how you can
time.
change that.
It's
Right.
just it really is. It's just one intention at a time, one breath at a time, one moment of just going, I am just grateful. Even if it's all a mess right now, I'm grateful that I am alive and experiencing it
Experiencing,
because
yeah.
life is experience.
Right.
And it'll, take me into the next moment. So be kind to yourself, take it a moment at a time. Notice that how can I what does gratitude, what does patience, what does kindness, what does health, whatever your keyword is look like here right now in this moment.
Yeah.
And that can just take you into the next.
Well, we are almost at the end of the show. It always goes so fast, and there's always like way more to discuss than even possible in an
Always.
but that is life unfolding, right? So I want to give listeners a chance to be able to know where they can find you. We talked about a free age reversal class that they can take. They can get to know more about you and what's possible to slow down and get in touch with that. Where do the listeners find you?
Yes. So you guys can go to humanlongevity institute.com. Humanlongevity institute.com. Just right there on that homepage, scroll down, you'll see where you can enroll for that free reverse class. It's an age reversal. Those modules are already there and done. You can access it. You can start getting into them right away to learn all the secrets to look and feel and live your best life.
Excellent. And so there's one question that I always ask my guests at the end of each show. And what is it that you are doing to intentionally thrive?
What am I doing to intentionally thrive? I am being intentional. Every day I'm waking up with intention and gratitude and being the conscious creator of my life. So I'm literally bringing adventure into every moment just by intention alone.
I love it. Adventure. Life is an adventure, and it is the idea of bringing bringing everything into an adventure. I love it. I love it. It's great. Well, again, we are at the end of the show. I really appreciate you being here. It's been fascinating. I feel like we've kind of gone all the way down to the real basics, right? of why are we here and what do we want out of life? And that's really it. And
Yeah.
listeners, please take a moment to decompress. And then if you're interested in finding out more, you can go to the Human Longevity Institute and find out more about the age reversal class. And I appreciate everybody for listening in. And thanks, Dr. Melissa Petersen. It was wonderful for you to be here. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Dr. Rachel. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Best Living Show. I'm your host, Dr. Rachel Sweet. Breathe, eat, sleep, thrive in every aspect of your life on transformationtalkradio.com. Tune in Thursdays at 6 p.m. to continue your new narrative and step into a new way of being. We are not what people have told us we are. We are so much more than that. I am going to help you thrive and get the answers you desire, not only in the external world, but on the inside. For more information, go to drrachelsweet.com. That's drrachelsweet.com.